He's Howard Eibach, a former copywriter and creative director and the author of 2 books on the creative brief.
And he's Henry Gomez, an ad agency strategist with, what is it now, 28 years of experience.
Going
Ladies and
on, yeah.
yeah, ladies and gentlemen, together, Henry and I are the Brief Brothers. We love talking about advertising, creative briefs, and briefing. Henry, we're back with another episode today. We're going to review and talk about a tool that one of our past guests, a creative director in Minneapolis named Tim Brunelle, brought to my attention when he posted about it on LinkedIn. This is a tool we're all familiar with. It's ChatGPT. He clearly uses the upgraded version, the one you have to pay for. And with this tool, and I also use it as well, with this tool, he created another tool which named itself to help him write better briefs. It calls itself the Creative Brief Coach. And he wrote an article that he published on his Substack account, and then he republished that on LinkedIn, explaining how he did this and how he uses it. Now, he uses a particular kind of creative brief template, which you and I have talked about in the past. It's the get to buy template, which I think you and I would agree is a rather sophisticated version of our brief. I personally would not recommend this to the marketers that I usually train, but I'm sure there's some strategists who use this. And what I found fascinating about it, and I sent this article along to you, and we're going to have a discussion about it today, was, is this a tool that you would find useful? Now, we both know there's a lot of churn out in the advertising world. Some people hate this thing called ChatGPT and feel threatened by it, and others feel quite the opposite, that it's a valuable tool. And I think you and I kind of land in between. I'm not threatened by it. I'm not going to rely on it, but I think it can be very helpful. So I thought it'd be fun to have a conversation about this. And since I don't write briefs, and you do, you would be a great person to pick your brain about this particular tool. So let's have a conversation. Let me just start out by asking, you had a chance to, read through Tim's article. And again, a big shout out to Tim for doing this. What are your initial takes on what he created and how it might help you as a brief writer?
So, like you said, I'm in the middle. Like I don't have an instant aversion to using a tool like this. At the same time, I don't think it's a panacea. I don't think that it'll necessarily. And to be fair, he says in the article he created this creative brief coach in about 20 minutes. So it hasn't been refined. I'm sure that there could be many improvements to it to make it even better as kind of a tool to help one write a creative brief, with the understanding that the person who's been assigned the creative brief is ultimately responsible for the quality of the brief, right? So the same way you could use a source of information, that source could be suspect. It's similar stuff goes with ChatGPT, but I think this goes beyond, because I've used ChatGPT to help me write briefs, but more in the sense of like getting general information about a particular subject. And so I'll give an example that recently I had a question about how cats are portrayed in Latin American popular culture. And so ChatGPT gave me a pretty comprehensive answer. Some of the stuff in it I double checked was valid. Some of it was completely invalid. Like, it had attributed the authorship of the Puss in Boots story to somebody who did not write it. So,
Check
so
your sources. You got to check
yeah,
your sources.
keeping in mind that Chat GPT and all of these AI models are using the collected wisdom of the entire internet, of which there's a lot of garbage, to give you answers. Now, what Tim did is something a little bit different, which is create a tool that coaches you in writing a brief. It's not, I don't think, really giving you the answers. I think it might give you some potential answers to some of the questions. But like I said, from what I saw of the screen captures that he posted in his Substack article, it felt like a 1.0, right? It didn't feel like a fully refined prototype of this creative brief coach. And I think based on how he writes the article, he would admit that too. This is
Yeah,
kind of
and
just
he has said that in his LinkedIn post that it is an early iteration, definitely.
so I don't see anything wrong with like using the collective wisdom of the internet to help coach you to write a better brief. I would be very cautious about the answers that such a brief coach suggests, and I would vet them myself and frankly put them through the same filters that I put my own creative brief writing through, which is this inspiring? Is it true? Um, is it different? Is it likely to move the needle? Um, because just because something is correct on a brief doesn't necessarily make it inspiring, right? Like, so, you know, or necessarily even the best correct thing that I could say about a product or a situation, right? So being correct is a low bar. Being correct and being the best kind of most apt to deliver a creative solution is are those are two different things.
Let's be clear about something. What you've used ChatGPT for is different from the tool that Tim created, correct?
Absolutely. So like I might ask you know, I like going back to the cat example, like why do Hispanics seem to be more reluctant to own or have cats in their households, right? So then ChatGPT gives you this whole answer, and then that might go, some of it after I vet it might go into my target description. Like my brief was about incentive. My client is in the cat category, and we want to grow cat acquisition among Hispanics, which historically have low acquisition. And so I need to find out what those barriers are. So I asked ChatGPT, what might some of the barriers be? And I compare it with my own notes, what I thought going in, but it also gives me some additional fodder. So could also, just ask it about, you know, different competitors or whatever. Like there's a lot of information that Chat GPT has access to. So in terms of getting background information, I see it as a more conversational, um, easier to use version of like a Wikipedia, right? Like I use Wikipedia a lot for briefs, mainly the one advantage that I see to like a Wikipedia over a Chat GPT in that sense is that Wikipedia usually has sourced footnotes.
Right.
So I can go to the article, the periodical, the journal, whatever that they're sourcing, and judge for myself, is this a credible source? Is this and I can actually read more in depth, like where maybe there's only a little blurb in the Wikipedia article, I could read a whole paper on this subject. Um, based on a footnote. So that I like about Wikipedia is, there's a lot of things I would not trust Wikipedia on, particularly in the realm of politics and things like that.
Or
But
history or anything that's serious.
yeah,
You've got to use Wikipedia the way you're using it, not as a dipping your toe in, but then check the sources.
absolutely. And so I always, refer to the footnoted sources, and if they are credible, then I'll if I'm going to quote something, I'll quote it from the original source material. I won't quote
Right.
Wikipedia. Like to me, Wikipedia is a way to get at other information. Um, so ChatGPT, I I've incorporated it in the last 6 or 7 months as part of my research, my Googling, my Wikipediaing, and now I consult ChatGPT as just another input to help. The, the benefit is how quickly it can turn things around, and so it's a good place to start, I think. And so that's how I've been using, which is different than this, which is you meant I think you mentioned, we weren't recording yet, that you created your own GPT to help you to be kind of like a coach in helping you come up with fiction plots,
Yep.
or to help you work, because that's an area that you want to work on, is writing fiction. So I think that there's and as Tim kind of points out, there's going to be a market for this. It's like create a GPT that can help people do X, Y, and Z thing that before they didn't have the help to do it. So in that sense, and I hadn't thought of it that way before. I didn't know about that functionality of it. I was using it more as like a Q&A, like I want to know more about this subject. What can you tell me? And it was spitting back information. This is a different kind of way of using Chat GPT,
Are you using the free version or did you upgrade to the paid version?
the free version.
Okay, the free version doesn't allow you to create the tool that Tim did
Per-
for his Creative Brief
Correct.
Coach. You
You can't create an actual specialized GPT for your unless you're in the subscription model that they have.
Right. And I'm using ChatGPT the way you and a lot of others are, as I'm kind of figuring things out as I go along. I'm not as knowledgeable about certain things as others are, and I'm kind of learning from others. Um, I I consider myself more of a memoirist than a fiction writer, but I've had interest in writing fiction. So once I heard about this tool's ability to create some kind of coach, I went on to my upgrade version of ChatGPT and started having this conversation that Tim recommended. I want to do this. What can you do to help me? And it said, well, I can do X, Y, and Z. And then, as I said before, it actually named itself. Now, for Tim, it called itself the Creative Brief Coach. For me, since I was looking for help in developing plot lines for a kind of a genre of fiction called thrillers, it called itself Story Weaver. Now, I have a suspicion that I'm not the first person to ask this specific request. So it has come up with the idea of Story Weaver long before I asked. And
Maybe.
others may have asked similar questions, and others will build on what I've just started on. And that's how ChatGPT works. It just learns from what has happened and builds on what it knows and what it has access to. So I don't know how often I'm going to use it, but to me it's a fascinating aspect of ChatGPT that I just didn't know about, and now that I do. So I'm wondering, as a strategist who works with mostly creatives and other strategists, because you have direct reports, you train mostly other creatives. What's your sense of how this might be used on the client side to write documents that they send to you that you use to help write your briefs? Because this is where I do my training.
Yeah. So, it's an interesting question, and you and I have talked about the dearth of training on briefs, and the reason you have a business doing workshops is because they need the coaching, right? So on the one hand, anything that helps coach them is a good thing, but on the other hand, if it's if they're somehow abdicating their responsibility to this tool, I think it could be dangerous. So
And we've seen that happen. The big article that was run a couple of months ago about the lawyer who wrote an entire brief based on what ChatGPT gave him without doing the vetting that you just described. And the judge just slapped him down big time when he discovered that a lot of the stuff in the brief was fake.
yeah,
You pay a
and
price.
yeah, and so because who knows that the ChatGPT doesn't have a more built-in morality to it, and it doesn't necessarily at this stage have the sophistication to grade the quality of it, the inputs, right? So imagine that among the things that the GPT trained on was a bunch of fictional books about the law, right? Which are great for us as consumers that we're reading a book, but they don't have to be legally, binding or whatever. And so maybe it's citing precedents that don't exist, that existed only in a fictional book. And ChatGPT, and I'm completely speculating, but
Right.
maybe it has no way of distinguishing like what is in the book The Pelican Brief versus what is an actual US code and the precedents of the different cases, which is frankly what lawyers get paid to do, is to wade through years and years of historical precedents to say why this applies in this case, and why this other precedent that seems to contradict it doesn't apply in this case, and make that argument. And so, I think the abdication of the ultimate responsibility could be a danger point. One other thing I wanted to add was as I was looking at the final output of the brief, and Tim again rightly acknowledges, like, is this a finished brief? No. Is it a good conversation starter? Yeah. Could we probably get to something from this? Yes. I was a little underwhelmed by the final brief that I was looking at. Although the format of the get to buy, and that doesn't mean get someone to buy buy, but it's get the target that we identify
Right,
to do X thing by doing X thing, right?
right, right.
And at the end, there were like several bullet points in each bucket, like rather than a specific, like, here's the target and here's what the target is like and a definitive, and we're going to get them to do this one thing that we need to do by doing this one thing. It was like a laundry list. So again, are these options that a brief writer can take and maybe choose one and then build up a brief around that? Yes. As it spatted out in this example, and again a 1.0 example of a tool that he just created 2 minutes ago, um it needs to be further refined. That by no means was a finished brief. It had too many things going on. It wasn't sharp enough. It wasn't pointed enough to be an effective creative brief, in my opinion.
I think this points to the reality that human input needs to be part of this picture, and we're not in any danger of being eliminated from that. And
At least at this early stage of
yeah, and
AI.
I would be fascinated to come back to this story a year from now or 2 years from now and see where are we, what's going on. Has Tim worked on this creative brief coach tool to refine it further? And if he has, what's it doing for him? So good stuff, Henry.
Good stuff, Howard.
He's Henry Gomez.
And he's Howard Ibach. And together we're the Brief Brothers. Till next time. Bye
Bye bye.
bye.